Grease is far more than a jukebox of doo-wop earworms. It's a time machine ticket that generations have clipped, stamped, and passed down like a beloved family recipe. The opening bass line of Grease is the Word doesn't simply start a movie, it detonates a chain reaction of cultural memory. Suddenly we're transported to an eternal 1959, where chrome glints under summer sun, leather jackets cling to greased-back dreams, and every school hallway vibrates with the possibility that a single slow dance could rewrite your destiny. But nostalgia is a double-edged stage light. Tilt it one way, and everything gleams. Poodle skirts swirl, white wall tires squeal, and love feels as weightless as a helium balloon. Tilt it the other, and you expose the scaffolding, the long rehearsal nights, the blisters inside those shiny saddle shoes, and the private doubts that gnawed at performers who wondered if the spotlight was blinding them to a more authentic life. When the director yelled cut, and the echo died in Rydell High's make-believe corridors, each actor carried home a very real suitcase filled with unresolved pasts, fragile futures, and the relentless pressure to keep smiling. Some leapt from set to stardom while quietly scheduling chemotherapy before the next interview. Others returned to cramped apartments where addiction crouched like a stagehand ready to pull them through a trapdoor. Together, they wove a tapestry as rich in heartbreak as in triumph, proof that behind every slick hand jive lies a pulse ticking with hope, fear, resilience, and regret. In the chapters ahead, we'll lift the velvet curtain on 14 lives forever, linked by Grease's incandescent glow, retracing the winding backstage paths that led them from cinematic immortality to the stark, unfiltered reality the credits never show. Fasten your seatbelts. This ride through the echoes of Rydell will be louder, longer, and more revealing than any encore the T-Birds ever revved up for. Olivia floated onto the screen as the picture-perfect Sandy, but real life wrote her as a warrior balladeer. Raised in Melbourne, she recorded her first single at 15 and had already snagged 4 Grammys before Grease came calling. Stardom sharpened when Hopelessly Devoted to You hit radio stations worldwide, yet even Platinum Records couldn't shield her from 3 separate bouts with metastatic breast cancer. Each recurrence rewrote her priorities. First launching the Olivia Newton-John Cancer Wellness and Research Center in Melbourne, then funding integrative medicine programs she wished had existed during her own hospital stays. Between chemo sessions, she toured relentlessly, performing barefoot to feel grounded, telling audiences the stage was her best therapy. On August 8, 2022, she died in her California ranch house, surrounded by John Easterling and daughter Chloe. Her final sunrise framed by eucalyptus trees she had planted herself. The $60 million estate she left behind was less a monument to wealth than a war chest for future patients, ensuring her lullabies of hope will outlive every curtain call. Alice's comedic timing felt effortless, honed across 800 Broadway performances of The Pajama Game and Annie. Yet behind her fluttery on-screen mannerisms lay a lifetime of stage fright and clinical depression. She kept a small notebook in her purse labeled Jokes for Bad Days, scribbling punchlines as self-medication. When her husband Philo died in 2003, silence spilled into their Studio City bungalow, turning mirrors into judging eyes. Health spiraled soon after, colon cancer surgery, 2 strokes, and partial paralysis that forced her to relearn speech through children's nursery rhymes. Even then, she mailed autographed photos to fans who enclosed self-addressed envelopes, a ritual she claimed kept her relevant. Alice passed on September 21, 2007, age 84, in a rehab facility that hung Grease lobby cards above her bed so she wouldn't forget the fun. Her $1 million estate was modest by Hollywood metrics, but the echoes of Mrs. Murdoch's quirky quips still bounce around dorm TVs at 2 a.m., coaxing lonely freshmen to giggle. Long before slinging hash as Vi the waitress, Joan was the Depression-era it girl who taught Busby Berkeley dancers to wink at the camera. She raised 2 children while shooting 3 films a year, paying alimony to ex-husbands who cited her career as grounds for desertion. By the time Grease arrived, Joan's veins were bruised from leukemia treatments and her finances drained by a manager's embezzlement scheme. Still, she insisted on doing her own stunts, refusing a hand double for flipping burgers because the audience deserves authenticity. Christmas night, 1979, she whispered "Cue lights" as if calling one last take, then slipped away, while Bing Crosby's White Christmas drifted from a radio. Estate lawyers found little cash but boxes of handwritten fan letters she'd reread in lonely hotel rooms, each envelope evidence that glamour could coexist with grit. "Cookie, lend me your comb" became Ed's permanent tagline after 77 Sunset Strip, and Vince Fontaine capitalized on that swagger. Yet typecasting is a velvet trap. Producers wanted the grin, not the man evolving beneath it. As roles dried up in the 70s, Ed flipped houses to stay solvent, but market crashes and a messy divorce torpedoed profits. He entered rehab quietly in 1987, emerging with an AA chip he kept on his keyring until his final day. Neighbors recall him cruising in a battered 57 Thunderbird, leather seats cracked but radio blaring doo-wop classics. On January 8, 2020, he died at 87 natural causes, leaving a Santa Monica condo filled with lunchboxes emblazoned with his own face, a museum to a youth Hollywood wouldn't let age. Blanche's hyperactive squeals were Dodie's real laugh, an octave too high, irresistibly contagious. Offstage, she was a devout reader of philosophy, quoting Kierkegaard between rehearsals to colleagues who rarely listened. 2 turbulent marriages ended before she turned 50. She later admitted her career was both spouse and child. Yet in retirement, the quiet of her Englewood Victorian was deafening. She adopted stray cats, naming each after Greek muses, and kept their beds in the unused nursery. Natural Causes claimed her on June 22, 2008 at 93. But local shelter workers still talk about the anonymous check that arrived every December in memory of Blanche and friends. They didn't learn Dodie was the benefactor until after her death. Sid's mind was a Tesla coil, firing gags faster than writers could script them. He improvised Coach Calhoun's coffee cup whistle on the spot, telling producers, "Kids will remember the little absurd things." Yet his private journals, donated posthumously to the Paley Center, reveal nightly battles with panic attacks so severe he kept an oxygen tank backstage. Alcoholism nearly gutted a career that shaped modern sketch comedy, leading him to smash a hotel TV with a lamp after watching a drunk version of himself on a talk show rerun. His wife Florence, champion and critic, left briefly in 1969 until a sober Sid carved their initials into a Malibu pier as apology. Clean 2 decades before he died on February 12, 2014, he spent retirement helping young comics master timing at a community theater, proving titanhood can bend toward mentorship. Ana Maria Cataldo, Annette's birth name, grew up in Los Angeles barrios, learning Mambo before English. Casting directors renamed her Annette Charles to sound less ethnic, a fact she discussed in lectures during her later career as a speech communication professor at Cal State Northridge. After Grease, a stalled career nudged her back to academia, just as persistent coughs foretold the lung cancer that would eventually metastasize to her brain. She chronicled treatment on a blog titled Cha-Cha's Second Lap, using humor to demystify radiation masks. Her August 3, 2011 death at 63 left former students weeping. They laid pink chiffon scarves on her office chair, a final swirl of color for the girl who once claimed every dance-off trophy. Eve's signature arched eyebrow was so iconic that Grease animators exaggerated it for the opening credits. Away from cameras, she journal scored every day on a perfection scale from 1 to 10. Friends say she rarely graded herself above a 6. Balancing scripts, PTA meetings, and her second husband Brooks West's heart condition left little time to process her own cancer diagnosis in 1985. She wrote breakup letters to cigarettes. "Dear old friend, our dalliance ends tonight," and taped them to mirrors as a plea to quit. Colorectal cancer still conquered her on November 12, 1990, but 3 generations of female comedy writers cite her as blueprint for snappy authority figures who never apologize for braininess. Born Jeffrey Charles William Michael Conaway, yes, 4 names. He first tasted narcotics after injuring his spine in a 1973 Broadway mishap. By Grease, pills were as routine as coffee. Fame from Taxi exacerbated dependence. His dressing room mini fridge stored more painkillers than soda. Multiple stints in rehab yielded hope, but not permanence. His final years, filmed for reality TV, became a cautionary public diary. Bloated limbs, slurred speeches, raw disbelief that greased lightning might run out of gas. On May 27, 2011, pneumonia ended the spiral. In a poignant twist, the battered '48 Dodge used in Grease's racing scenes was later restored by fans and dedicated to addiction recovery efforts, echoing Jeff's plea that people remember my fight, not just my fall. Susan once held the Miss Washington crown and trained with Olympic-level discipline, traits that bled into Patty Simcox's militant pep rally routines. Hollywood rewarded her with auditions but not longevity, and she bristled when interviewers asked her to perform Patty's high-pitched squeal decades later. After a second divorce, she moved to Miami, teaching water aerobics to retirees who had no idea they were stretching alongside Grease royalty. Complications from a private illness cut her life short on May 2, 2024, age 72. She left behind a scrapbook labeled Life After Pom-Poms, filled with inspirational quotes and postcards from former students who credited her for making arthritis fun. In rehearsal, Dennis choreographed Leo's menacing strut to hide a childhood clubfoot that had once required corrective braces. Off-set, he navigated Los Angeles gay bars under an alias for fear a public outing would end his career. The 1980s AIDS crisis turned that fear to terror. By diagnosis, he'd already lost 3 partners. Determined not to become a statistic, he lobbied for confidentiality laws while disguising his weight loss with oversized coats. When he died on April 20th, 1994, age 46, close friends held a candlelight vigil outside Paramount Gate, their candles forming the shape of a car. One final go greased lightning for the king of the Scorpions. Daryl jokingly called himself Hollywood wallpaper, always present, seldom admired. Yet he meticulously documented every shoot in pocket diaries, noting the craft service menu and which extras looked lonely so he could eat with them. Health issues, possibly tied to years of on-set smoke machines, plagued his 70s, and he willed those diaries to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. When he died on April 11, 2014, obituaries were short, but actors scouring the diaries discovered notes praising their earliest auditions, posthumous bouquets from a man who understood the pain of anonymity. Stockard's Rizzo flipped the ingenue trope on its head, vulnerable, sarcastic, and unafraid of the dark. Off-screen, she craved similar complexity, studying at Harvard's Radcliffe College, funding off-Broadway productions, and hosting salons where playwrights debated politics into dawn. 3 marriages dissolved under the strain of restless ambition, yet she later described herself as divinely optimistic about love. At 81, she gardens heirloom tomatoes in her Los Angeles backyard, reads neuroscience journals for fun, and occasionally reclaims Rizzo's growl on charity stages, proof that resilience can age into grace. Frankie was a chart topper before Grease, but the film's cameo gilded his nostalgia into legend. Today, he tours winery amphitheaters, crooning beauty school Dropout to crowds embracing wrinkles as proof they survived disco. A highly publicized divorce almost derailed him in the 90s until he channeled grief into a cookware line that still sells on QVC. At 84, he pilots his own vintage Beechcraft Bonanza, logging solo flights over Malibu at sunrise, a literal angel in the clouds, living the promise he once sang from a glittering staircase. Walk the abandoned Venice High courtyard, Grease's exterior set at dusk, and you might imagine distant echo steps. Danny's swagger, Sandy's hesitant heels, Rizzo's defiant clack. Yet step closer, and the chalkboards reveal real math. 14 lives, dozens of divorces, millions of dollars earned and lost, triumphant comebacks, and defeats whispered into hospital pillows. Grease endures because it sells eternal youth, but the permanence we yearn for exists only in celluloid loops. The truth is quieter, inscribed in hospice ledgers, rehab intake forms, and cardboard boxes of fan mail read under bedside lamps. Still, those echoes persist, insisting the music was real, the friendships sincere, and the struggles worthy of remembrance. Every era rediscovers Grease in its own way, projected onto drive-in screens under meteor-dusted skies, streamed on phones during cross-country bus rides, or belted out in raucous karaoke bars where strangers join hands like reunion classmates who never actually met. In those moments, the film performs its shimmering sleight of hand, time collapses, cynicism melts. And for the length of one Technicolor roller coaster, we all believe that high school love is bulletproof, and every heartbreak can be choreographed into a show-stopping finale. Yet the radiant illusion is stitched together by artists who absorbed the very aches we're temporarily fleeing. They buried children, negotiated bankruptcy, confronted terminal diagnoses, and checked into rehab long after the last theater emptied of popcorn fumes. Their parallel narratives deliver a double lesson that resonates louder with each passing year. First, joy is no fraud. Just because sorrow shares the same address, Grease's jubilant harmonies are genuine precisely because the people singing them understood life's dissonant chords. Second, when the curtain falls, our responsibility as audiences doesn't end with applause. It begins with empathy. Celebrate the performance, then look for the human behind the spotlight burn, the dancer nursing shin splints, the comedian rewriting jokes to drown out a panic attack. So next time You're the One That I Want pops up on a retro playlist, let it spark more than nostalgia. Hear Olivia's determination vibrating beneath every crystal note. Feel Jeff Conaway's bruised swagger powering each engine rev. Sense Alice Ghostley's brave grin, masking quiet battles with the dark. Carry their complexities forward into hospital waiting rooms, addiction recovery fundraisers, honest conversations with friends who seem fine but aren't. Because after the final key change fades and the imaginary lockers slam shut, the most important sound that remains is the shared heartbeat of imperfect people doing their best to shine. If we remember that rhythm and honor it with kindness, then Grease will remain. Not just a timeless escape, but a timeless reminder of why we still need one another long after the projector has whirred to a stop.